It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted from a bubble. From week 4 of a lockdown in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis. I'm the host of the show. We kicked this round of lockdown off in New Zealand on, I think, a Tuesday from memory. Tuesday, maybe midnight, technically Wednesday, a minute before a Wednesday. So I'm in the Friday, thanks to machinery telling me this morning it was in fact a Friday. I'm in the Friday of week 4 of our Delta variant lockdown. It's exciting stuff. Look, I'm doing better, okay, this time round on a micro level, on a Lewis level, on a macro late-stage capitalism, overpopulation, the world is burning level, not so well. I'm still putting product in my hair every morning, though I looked down just before and I have a food stain on my trousers, not from today. It doesn't look like the colour of something that I've stuffed into my face today. It looks like maybe 2 or 3 days ago. Look at that. It's quite a little bit unbelievable there. And I laughed at my own fart yesterday. And then I posted that I'd laughed at my own fart on Facebook. So that's lockdown summed up. It's good times. My guest today is Kris Holmes. Before I chat a little bit about him in the episode, the quest in these virtual lockdown times is the perfect audio quality on a Zoom call. And I think so far, last episode's guest, Scott Towers, is the winner with his... I got the name of the microphone wrong in the intro last week. I got the name of the microphone wrong when I referenced it to Kris in this episode. The classic broadcast mic is, of course, the Shure SM7B. So congratulations, Scott. That's all the people in my bubble cheering. Kris had a good mic, good setup, had headphones on, but I don't understand how this happens sometimes and other times it doesn't, because I've got all my settings set correctly for trying to optimize audio quality. One of the main things you're trying to do, that is obviously by purpose and design in Zoom, is when you hear that kind of grrr you do sometimes on Zoom, that's echo cancellation, and it's designed for a whole lot of people kind of collaborating in work meetings and so on, okay? Pretty obvious. So it should be avoidable when you turn off the echo cancellation and stuff, which I had in the set, but it happened a few times, so I don't know whether it's actually in this case a connection lag or whatever. But anyway, look, still sounds, if I toot my own horn, still sounds better than 99% of Zoom based podcast episodes I've heard. And anyway, so Kris, I wanted to have Kris on not only because I remember him as a raconteur from the one time we'd met, which comes up in the episode, but also because I've been thinking about just chatting to people about day-to-day experience. And what I'm meaning there is, not only is Kris an interesting fella in his own right, but he ended up with his green card in his hot little hands the day Trump got elected. So a New Zealand-born gentleman who moved over there, when would that have been, 2016? And so it'd be interesting. I don't know, like COVID and all that sort of business felt like it didn't need a lot of discussion on the podcast last year, but it kind of feels like it does now. So we kind of covered the reality of that in the US, which of course we've seen a lot of kind of footage of over here, and we talk about being in Trump's America. We talk about just being in America in general, and in particular being in Texas, and in particular being in San Antonio, Texas. So living in the USA, living in Texas, living in San Antonio. Imagine that as a Venn diagram and how aesthetically pleasing that would be. We also talk about, speaking of COVID is a combat sport. We talk about travel being a forbidden fruit, and a real quote that sticks out from Kris in this episode about, just thinking about where New Zealand's at the moment, with people getting vaccinated, with crazies with poor information talking about not getting vaccinated. I spoiler alert, but Kris says it's the people who do not want to take the vaccine who are now struggling with COVID, where he is. We talked about, I asked the question, what is skateboarding, open bracket, puffs blunt, close bracket, the influence of technology on mastering a craft in relation to skateboarding and other things, and how that 13-year-old bet Tony Hawk's best trick a while ago. That was very detailed. We talked about Rodney Mullen. You want an interesting fella. If you're listening to Long-Form Conversation podcast, you obviously are interested in people talking about themselves and being humans and stuff they do. Go look at the Rodney Mullen doco. It's up on YouTube. I think it's called From the Ground Up. I've watched a few of them. I just had a quick look now. But an interesting man in his own right, never mind being quite a genius and pioneering freestyle skateboarder. A question that came up was whether you can still call the UK Europe, and I reflected on that. It depends whether you're talking geography or economics, doesn't it? I don't think much changes geography-wise. It's still part of Europe. Someone else wants to claim it. There's a great story from Kris right at the end about a holy grail day in the record collecting, buying and selling racket. Okay, so thanks to my supporters, Free FM. They're doing the bit for COVID awareness, but they're doing it in a way a lot of outlets can't. Daily info, and this buzz me out, bro. They do updates regarding coronavirus in 9 Pacific Island languages. You not only will get that on Free FM, but across several of the country's 12 community access broadcasters, of which they are one of. Check out their roster of shows at freefm.org.nz. Please like the show. That's my show. Leave a message, subscribe, and share on one or more of the following services: Verbal Highs on Twitter, Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook, Verbal Highs on Apple and Google Podcasts. You can also stream via Spotify or iHeartRadio, and it all beams out from my little piece of real estate on the internet, which is verbalhighs.com. And there you will also find the New Zealand podcast directory, which I now have up to 400 shows listed from, in, or about New Zealand. Kia ora!
Verbal high straight down from up above.
Here he is.
Yeah, let me just turn my volume down. Hold up.
I'm loving how I'm selecting these podcast guests who've got exceptional computer-based audio setups. Look at you.
Well, I can't hear myself. Can you hear my microphone?
Yeah, crystal clear. But is it going to be disconcerting for you? I guess you can hear yourself in your own head.
I guess I don't need to hear myself, do I? No. Okay. All right. So yeah, it's
what?
It's kind of, let me just pull one off. So it's kind of just it's not actually that fancy pants. I just kind of it's just a USB mic that I have done recording with for a long time, but it's nothing special, but it seems to work okay. So
look, we'll
go with it.
For ages, I was kind of almost, I don't know, like if you relate to this, when being like quite militant about something turns out to be detrimental. So I was like, look, my whole show concept was it has to be face to face, and I'll lose all this like human connection if I do it the other way. But the reality is that I think we're going to be, for better or for worse, doing a lot more of this, right? So this is how you connect with people, right?
Mate, it's just been so crazy. Like, had we even heard of Zoom like 18 months ago? It's just ridiculous.
What about what about the
so much time?
What about the Skype people? They're probably feeling a bit like Nokia right now.
Yeah, just left out. Skype, FaceTime. They're like, man, we got left behind.
Hey, so I really liked your reaction to me asking, like, can I be so bold as to ask, have you heard some of my episodes before? Because you seemed
I tune in every now and then. I'll like check out some of them. I hadn't listened to any for a few months. I'm not a huge podcast guy.
Yeah.
But I just went out for a walk this evening and I listened to Scott's one that was
cool.
up on the page. And so I got through pretty much all of that in my walk, and then just after getting home, just left it running. So it was good to hear his voice again and kind of hear what you guys are talking about. And I just wanted to sort of, that I guess is a kind of a recent one. So I was like, all right, I gotta kind of do a little bit of homework on what we might be covering and what your podcast is on about these days. So yeah.
Well, he had not that it's a gear competition, but I named the microphone wrong in the intro. He had that classic Shure broadcasting mic that I think's about $1,000 to buy. Not the 57, the one that you see plonked on tables on breakfast TV and stuff. Anyway, how are you? How long ago did you move to the US?
Oh man, it's been about probably 6 years now. So I left in, it would have been May 2015, and I went on tour and then extended my visa out and decided I wasn't going to come back. So I flew back for probably, I think it was a couple of months, and basically got rid of all my stuff and went back to the US and never looked back. So yeah.
So you moved over just in a pre-Trump America.
Yeah. So what happened? It was so hilarious. So my conditional green card came through the day that Trump got elected.
Yay.
And I was just like, can I give this back now?
Hey, you know what's funny with that? I was thinking, like, we don't want to get, if you're going to be, I'd love you to be quite frank and honest about your experience since you've been there, but we don't want to get you put on a boat back home. But then you are constitutionally protected, Kris.
Yeah, I think as something of an outsider, I can comment on things in a certain way. Like you do get that, especially living in the South down here in Texas. Like there's a lot of anti-immigrant feeling around, and I do my best to surround myself with relatively like-minded people. Like I'm super left-leaning though, so it's really hard to find other left people. Because
there's
often
often
a lot of my friends have some aspect of conservatism going on. So,
well, I don't know if you're aware, but obviously with Rogan being the biggest podcaster in the world, his kind of like moving to Austin and in turn trying to single-handedly like say this is the new entertainment capital of the US, right? So I've heard people, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of people
right.
kind of broadly in that circle of American comedians talk about how Austin is kind of one of the more liberal parts of Texas. Is that kind of true? And how does that compare to San Antonio where you are?
Well, traditionally the big cities are more liberal than the country towns and the rural areas. When I first started coming to Texas back in the probably mid 2000s, early 2000s, everyone always said that Austin, being the capital of Texas, is like not really Texas. They were always saying it's just this liberal oasis in the middle of Texas.
Yeah. And
you've got to go to other places to get a feel for like real Texas. And to some extent, that's kind of true. Austin being such a huge college town is that it draws people in from all around the states who are probably a little bit more liberal and come here to get some sort of Texas experience and things like that. And so, yeah, they're not wrong when they're saying that. Like, but the big cities, by and large, usually reasonably go like Democratic or close to Democratic.
So, what was it that? My guess would be that you started going to the States or Texas at least early 2000s because you were a touring musician, right? Is that correct to start with?
I was doing a lot of DJing, and so yeah, like I've always been a musician and like DJed for a long time as well. But a lot of those early American trips were based around DJing and record buying. So yeah.
So there's so many DJs, Kris.
Yeah.
You have to carve out a niche or maybe a niche where you're from presently.
Yeah.
What was it that got you over there being able to play? Especially, actually, I was thinking even going to the US and saying I'm going to DJ over there. I mean, there's already there's an abundance there as well, right?
Yeah, I do think about that a lot, and I think it was pretty ballsy. Like I put myself out there quite a bit in the like the infancy of internet message boards and things like that, and so there was always quite a big like record collecting scene and DJ scene on the internet, and I kind of got in on that, and like you would have, I guess, like a really strong network. So a lot of the times when I started coming over in the early 2000s, I was able to put together DJ appearances and stuff, around going like digging for records and around meeting up and hanging out with acquaintances from the message boards and things. And that was just something that in New Zealand, like I was collecting, I thought at the time, in something of a vacuum. Like there was nobody else really doing, or that I felt was doing what I was doing and into the sort of records that I was into. And I kind of was like just blindly collecting and not really having anybody else around me back home where that I knew of, you know. And as the years went on, I met a handful of other people that were good and had records too. But a lot of, just because what we were doing is so niche, is that it was just really difficult. And I felt like I had to get the US and the UK just because, and Europe, and just because those scenes were, that was where it was, you know. Like,
Okay,
I guess, can we still call the UK Europe? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah. Ireland probably can. Well, that's not the UK anyway. So people are sitting on the edge of their seats right now, mate, because you haven't actually said what it is that you do or collect DJ wise. Right. That makes it so.
So my specialty and what I'm known for over the last probably, oh God, like, it's got to be 20 years, 25 years maybe, is original, like, rhythm and blues, soul and funk on original 45s.
Great. Dusty fingers. Dusty
Yeah,
fingers
real
business.
dusty fingers. So it's got to be original press, got to be 45s, and it's got to be 50s, 60s, 70s, R&B, soul, and funk.
We're going to come back to this as we are the earlier topics I've introduced. I'm doing a lot of scene setting here. Work with me. You actually are also, you're a busy man. You are also a live musician as well, aren't you? You're a solo artist.
Yeah, when COVID's not going down, so when we can actually get out there and play shows. So it's been a bit quiet recently because of this whole pandemic thing. But yeah, I played guitar for 29 years and did like a lot of gigging around New Zealand. Not a lot of stuff, like some studio work too, and like songwriting and bands and things like that. So it's one of the things. Like I love the guitar. I'm reasonably proficient at many instruments, but guitar has been the one that's really kind of paid my way for a long time. So
we'll come back to that too. The other piece of scene I want to set is for at least part of your kind of adult life, your kind of job part of life, if you will. You are a music educator as well. You're a high school teacher, right? Yeah.
Well, that's been my pretty much my entire adult life, man.
Oh, really?
That's
okay.
great.
For some reason, I thought it was actually with that. Actually, this is another bit of context. How old are you? You're a bit younger than me, right? I'm 44.
Yeah, I'm 42.
Okay. For some reason, like, you don't have a huge internet footprint, but for some reason I thought that you'd kind of come on into that later in life. So we can discuss that. So that's a good segue to prior to kind of all of this and where you are now. We've got a man settling in pre-Trump. Well, actually, no, you got your green card the day Trump came to power. You're now living in post-Trump America. You're a DJ and a record collector and a music teacher. So let's go back a bit before we come to all of that. Where are you from originally, bro? Where'd you grow up in New Zealand?
I'm from Papamoa Beach, which is by Mount Maunganui, Tauranga. So I was born in Tauranga Hospital, grew up at Papamoa, went to Papamoa Primary School. So my home beach is Papamoa Beach. My home mountain is Mauo. And my home moana is Tauranga Moana. So that's my home. And I'm missing it a lot right now because I can't get back there. So as long as like I knew, I can just go back there whenever
I know what you mean.
It's not locked down and there's no mandatory quarantine. But now that that's taken away, I'm kind of like, man.
And even if that's it, and even if you didn't for years, it's like you can.
And now I can't. So I'm like,
But that's like so that's the classic, because I had a guest on, my old buddy Fee. She built a reggae sound system from scratch. Talk about using the Melbourne lockdown to good use. But I kind of brought up with her. She's from Palmy, and Palmy to me, like, is one of these odd spots in New Zealand where, like, it's generally a given that part of growing up in New Zealand is living a coastal life, right? But there we have you, kind of, you did in that respect. Like, it sounds like you probably got into surfing and...
Yeah, so like Mount Maunganui is like your classic beachfront town, and it's a lot like some of those Southern California beachfront towns, like your Hermosa beaches and Long Beach and everything. Like everybody's just surfing and skateboarding, and it's just part of what you do growing up. You know, like I was heavily involved in skateboarding, and of course, like surfed a bit as well. Like our house was like one street back from the ocean. So
great, man.
It's lovely, you know, and like the surf at Papamoa ain't that great because Motiti Island's right out there and like it breaks up the swells. So but you get down to the mountain, like the mountain's just iconic, you know, it's lovely. That place goes off in the summertime, and it's changed a lot since I was a kid.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's one of my favorite places in the world.
I'll get back to what I was chuckling at, but what do you mean it's changed a lot since you were a kid? Like what's been the changes you've seen?
Oh man, like all those high-rise buildings down there, like all down the end of the mountain, like as you're leaving the main street and you're driving towards the actual mountain, like that just used to be like batches and stuff. And now it's like surfer's paradise. And that kind of started probably like, I guess 15 years ago, just like the building up of everything.
And it's sounding like it's maybe a bit more broadly a metaphor for like how kind of New Zealand's changed, right? I'm going to forget. I often forget key words when I really need them. What the people say increasingly is a myth about New Zealand of everyone being kind of on equal footing. What's that word, Kris?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to throw you other thing. But yeah, the kind of increasing gap between the haves and have-nots once you start having kind of like, shiny super apartments appearing along the beach.
Yeah, there's like a wealth disparity. There's like a disparity between like what it used to be and what it is now, and then the influx of people into what it is now. Like it's almost like a gentrification almost of stuff that's happened there. But, you know, it's always been a holiday town.
Egalitarian. Sorry. That's the word. Someone else would have been yelling it with their earbuds on right now, listening back. Nice. And so when did you get on out? Did you finish school there, or did you go to school somewhere else?
Yeah, I did high school there. Graduated from Mount Maunganui College, and you know, I was gonna go to Waikato Uni and become an English teacher, and I just didn't turn up the first day of uni. I just didn't go, and took that year. I guess it turned out being a gap year, and I just did like a lot of music, like playing guitar, a lot of skateboarding, and ended up basically ending my skateboarding career by like blowing my ankle into pieces. I had to get it reconstructed.
Oh.
And there was like about a 6-hour surgery on that, and it's never been right since. So it's like 20 something years of painkillers later, and it's just, yeah. So I got to the end of that year and I was like, what am I going to do? And I decided I didn't want to go do teaching or English teaching. So I went to music school. So I went to Waikato, moved to Hamilton, and at that stage, the music course at what was Waikato Polytech's, now Wintech, they were taking like 16 people in every year. And I made it into the 16 and went to that course and did 3 years there studying everything. Like we did guitar, we did songwriting, we did audio engineering,
which would have been history, I think
music theory, all sorts of stuff.
That sounds like a course like that would be far more commonplace now and far less so back then, right? Even just technology availability wise in New Zealand. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. One of the big selling points of that course was the recording studio set up there, and it was really new. Like it had only been set up for a couple of years, and it was pretty state of the art, really. Like as far as digital recording, and they also had like reel to reel tape and everything, and it's just a fantastic setup. So to get in and just do that, and the lecturers were all top as well, and it was really like a pioneering program in the country for that sort of stuff. Yeah. And really looking back, like I owe so much of what I've become as far as a music teacher and a musician to that course. And it's interesting to look back on and think like what would have happened if I hadn't have gone to music college. What if I'd gone to English teaching college first up? Like,
well, just briefly on that, it sounded like the way you described it is like, at first I thought, like he partied too hard the night before, or he was flaky back then, but it sounds to me like you intuitively knew now is not the time, and perhaps I don't actually want to be, in particular, an English teacher, you know?
Yeah.
So a year well spent.
Because I ended up being a teacher, so yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So skateboarding, man, like I had Levi on a while back. You know who Levi is. Yeah, I don't have to do
absolutely.
the ridiculous catchphrase. But
he's much better on a skateboard than I am. So.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say though, I think, you know, and I know you're a contemplative guy, like I think skateboarding is often misunderstood by a lot of people. Like, can you easily pigeonhole it as a sport? Is it an art form? Is it what was the appeal of skateboarding to you, and what do you see skateboarding as?
You know, for me, I think at the time, it was something to do, like something that you could do by yourself.
That's a good answer.
You could concentrate on.
Yeah.
Something where you could find friends that did it as well and know that you had a solid group. Like I had a solid group of friends and we would all do that stuff. And, it just, it was blowing up. Like it was really big in the mid 90s, you know, like it was early 90s, mid 90s, like skateboarding was huge. And I think, that was something that appealed to myself and a lot of my friends, was just the idea of the close relationship to surfing. And it was just something that I just grew up, like everybody was doing it. Like I remember being a kid in the 80s, like probably mid 80s, and my dad would just be like outside his shop just getting so pissed off at the skateboarders that were skating out the front of his shop. And I was always like, man, that actually looks kind of cool.
And now that's funny, yeah. No, I was going to say there is like, you know, what I notice now is like, it must be so hard trying to be a teenager and rebel when like your 45-year-old dad comes out skateboarding with you and is like one of his 10 pairs of, you know, box fresh kicks or whatever. Yeah. You pointed out a real difference.
I had that, like my brother-in-law and my nephew. Like my brother-in-law, he was a skater. He was really, really good as well, and he's a couple years younger than me. But he's got his son, my nephew, really into skateboarding, and so they go and like takes them to skate school, and they like do all these little contests and everything, and puts these videos up of my nephew doing these skateboarding tricks, and it's great, you know, like it's super fun to see that they're like having that fun, and like you can kind of pass that down almost now because like God, like my dad, I know he had a skateboard when he was a kid, like, cause that was big, like in the 60s as well, the first skateboarding craze. And they have like, take like wheels off roller skates and hammer them onto like a piece of wood from the dressing table or whatever, and ride that down until the whole thing rips apart. And, you know, but like my dad would never get on a skateboard when I was a kid. Like,
no, man, everyone looked like 70 when they were 50. How things have changed. Lucky. I think Gen X, I think it's something about, you know, like we were the first generation to really like get a whole lot of pop culture in the mix of our upbringing. I think that plays out in a lot of ways. But yeah, read the youth now, when I see like people skating, and it applies to like anything, DJing, whatever, like the technology available to them's really different to see. Like I always see groups of guys out like basically filming skate vids, you know, like to be able to film a skate vid when we were knocking about with the people I knew that skated in the eastern suburbs of Wellington, like what kind of sorcery was that? No one had a video camera, you know?
Exactly. And if you had a video camera, it was like the size of I don't know, like 3 lunch boxes. Like,
and then the other thing, like, and I actually like this is a borrow from hearing Tony Hawk talk about it, but I've heard again like DJs and other creative people talk about it, like the level that younger generations are getting to now based on things like YouTube videos, like you know, people are getting to a skill level that is way higher overall based on resources available. Folks, he's nodding in definite agreement.
Yeah. Like it blows my mind, man. Like you see these like 11-year-old kids and stuff, and they're just like ripping just crazy tricks. And I'm just like blown away. I'm like, man, like they have no fear. And I think we had no fear too when we were young. And so like your foolishness of being a youth, but just, yeah, you're right. Like to get a how to skateboarding video cassette back in the day, you had to write away to like one of the magazines, send your money in an envelope, and then like they would send you the tape back like 2 months later or whatever with like how to do the tricks. Now you just go on YouTube and click it and someone's showing you how to do that stuff.
So lastly on the skating, which is kind of where I started off, and you can tell me whether I'm being kind of too highfalutin here, but and I think with a lot of things, you know, hindsight is 20/20, and as you get older, you kind of frame things differently. And yeah, back to kind of what Levi was saying, which I tend to agree with. I was never deep into skating basically because I was terrible at it. But do you think it's quite a deeply kind of creative, artistic kind of a pursuit, which you wouldn't really say that as a 15-year-old boy, right? But do you think it is a kind of an art form as much as it is a sport?
You know, I think that there have been many skaters who have made art on a skateboard. Like the way that they invent those tricks or put the tricks together in a way.
Someone like Day One Song.
Yeah, like Day One. I remember he came in the late 90s and we got to do a skate demo at the Mount and he was skating and that was fun. But he was one of those dudes who were just super technical, you know, and like like some of that stuff is artistic. Rodney Mullen is another guy. Like when he started doing all the freestyle stuff, like freestyle itself as a style of skating was...
He's such an interesting character.
It was kind of weird. Like it was almost like ballet on a skateboard, but like the stuff that he was doing was like really, really cool and like just mind blowing, you know? And then when freestyle kind of dropped off and he kept doing that stuff, like the only place you would see freestyle tricks was like a Rodney Mullen spot on a video. And you'd be like, man, like this is crazy. And yeah, like, there's definitely people who, when they do tricks, like they just look better than other people doing that same trick. And that's kind of, I think, where a lot of the art comes from as well. It's like, I guess, a technical art, I suppose. But yeah, you know, like I would definitely put it down as being a creative outlet when you're a teenage boy, is to have your skateboard and to be trying to make your skateboard do things with your feet that you want to make it do, you know, like it's an outlet for sure.
And you were well into hardcore then, eh? Like, were you in bands or?
Yeah, I was in bands. Nothing that was really huge, but yeah, we played a good amount of shows doing like punk rock and hardcore and stuff like that. Started off in bands in high school in the Mount and then through Hamilton. And then when I moved to Auckland as well, at the start of being in Auckland, I was still in that scene to a certain extent and then kind of left it in the probably mid 2000s, I guess, kind of walked away from there and just didn't really like stop liking it, but just like had been to like hundreds of shows and just thought I don't need to be doing this anymore. So yeah, like I'll still go see big bands like over here when they tour and it's a band that I like want to check off my hardcore punk rock want list. I'm like, man, like a couple of weeks ago I went and saw the Descendants and I've been wanting to see the Descendants for like 25 years. So I got to go to that show and it was fantastic. You know, it was like everything that I'd ever dreamed a Descendants show would be. So just 25 years later. So,
a little bit of a side note, it's not directly on topic, but have you been to a Roland spoken word show?
I have not.
I still want to, man. That guy fascinates me.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, you know. Yeah, he's an interesting dude.
Yeah, he is. I just have heard him on some podcasts, and it's just incredible how kind of militant and how like solo he is. He almost lives like a wolf, you know. There's something going on there that's not being told as part of the story. I just hope the guy's okay.
He's fun. Like I would like to sit down and talk music with him. Like
totally.
He knows his stuff. Like he's a big cassette tape collector and he's into that sort of thing.
Oh, you've gone.
I think we'd be able to have a good conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I think he's someone who you'd have to catch in the right mood and approach in the correct manner, you know. But I think, yeah, totally. If you got him, it'd be one of the best you ever had.
Is he really that angry though, or is he just kind of putting it on?
No, I think he's mellowed with age, the stuff I've heard him talk about. What I'm more meaning, man, because like I say, I've kind of revisited him through hearing him on as a pod guest, and he's always really giving and, really engaged. But there's just this narrative going through it of how solo he lives, and he really talks up like how much he likes that, and I just kind of feel like, man, sometimes it feels like this dude needs a hug, but yeah. So where was that? We're going to get back. Get back to leading on up to getting to the States. So where'd you score your first teaching job? Did you move out of the Mount?
So I got to the end of studying music, and I got my degree. And I was waiting around for my wife at the time to finish her degree. She was a year behind me. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? Am I just going to get a job in Hamilton for a year or what? And it just turned out that year was the year that the Waikato Polytech, the music course that I was doing, they had synced in with the music teacher training course at Waikato Uni. So I could get fully certified as a teacher just by doing this 1 year course. So I was like, perfect.
Great.
So I went there and did a year of learning how to become a music teacher, and turned into like the best thing ever because it's taken me to Texas even.
Yeah, I get pissed off, and you're the classic debunking of this. Those who do can, those who can't teach. Man, I've come to it later in life, but it supports so much of what I do. Like I'm doing this, this is kind of, this is related to work like me doing it. It's like, and it's if you're someone who's in the like kind of contract-based creative, whatever arts world, it's a regular frickin' gig and income, man. You know?
I love it because it's exactly those reasons. Like I, as like working as a musician while I was studying, like you're always worrying where that next paycheck's coming from. When's the next gig, and you're trying to hustle. And I hate hustling. And so to have this where I can do music every day, satisfy any sort of musical performance itch, because I'm basically performing to a captive audience of kids all day.
You got an imprisoned audience.
Yeah, pretty much, like from 8:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. I'm just basically playing shows to a revolving crowd that comes in. So it is perfect because you then get the vacation time, and I use those vacation times to go on tour to the States and go on record buying trips to the States and all that sort of stuff, and the UK and Australia and around NZ. So that time is still there. And, a steady paycheck cannot be snuffed at. And I'm not the most riskiest dude in the world, so I like that routine of knowing that that's going to be there, and then using that to kind of like cushion any other thing that I want. Because face it, like when you're flying from New Zealand to the States to go on like a DJing / singer-songwriter tour for say 3 weeks of a school holidays, there's no way you're going to make your money back on that doing niche genre stuff.
It was weird you say you're not, like, I can't remember how exactly your wording, but you're not a risk taker or whatever. Like, for a lot of people, that translates to staying in the same place they grew up, like getting, like, I think, it's an adventurous life you've led. You know what I mean? It's like, and no disrespect to people who do that. Everyone's got their own comfort levels, but it's not as risk averse as you might think.
I did have that. Yeah, I guess that being able to satisfy that itch of using the school holidays to get out and go places was a big deal. But I guess the lack of risk taking was involved with knowing that you're coming home to that job, Hey, and that's going to be there.
So our background for the listeners is pretty much nil, except for one brief dalliance in which you were a very generous participant in my PhD study, and then of course there's the obligatory add each other on Facebook and watch snippets of our life play out over the last 5 or 6 years, or whatever it be. So I raised that to say I just sort of assumed you'd met a US lass, but sounds like you've been married for a long time, Kris.
No, so this is my second marriage. So yeah. So there we go.
She's American, though, isn't she?
I can tell you how that happened. So, God, would have been 2014. I was headlining a show in LA, and I met a girl who was there with one of the opening DJs, and we stayed in touch, and both of us ended up single across the course of that year. And then when I came back to headline that venue again in the next year, 2015, she was there, and we hit it off, and now she's my wife. So, yeah.
She's American, though, yeah?
Yeah, she's American.
Texas born and bred?
Yep, so she's born in Florida, but we try not to hold that against her. She grew up in Vermont, and we met in LA, so yeah.
Okay, Florida, again, from my, I don't know whether my podcast listening view of the world entirely counts as data or accuracy, so I'll just run some stuff by you that I've heard. Okay. I've heard that Florida's, you know what's funny, Kris? Around a year ago, or however long ago, like, talking about COVID on the podcast seemed like a real drain, but it's, I don't know, I really feel like talking about it now, especially with Delta having hit here, which seems like I'm coping with the lockdown better this time personally, because I've learned from last time, but the weight of kind of what's going on globally is heavier to me this time. But anyway, I've heard that Florida has had quite a relaxed approach to kind of COVID action. Is that fair? Like, Florida's kind of a state where a lot of people are kind of purposely not wearing masks and so on?
I think that for a while that was true.
Yeah.
The thing about America is that you're always going to get a large number of the population who don't want to do what another large number of the population want to do.
I think it's the human condition, but I hear you in the context of American culture. Yeah.
And I know that it happened in Texas too. Like, we were slow at putting masks on. Yeah. And Florida was similar. They got hit very badly with COVID that first time around.
Lots of elderly.
Some of the time. Yeah. So did we here in Texas. We got hit very hard. And at the moment, we're also getting hit hard, but it's now the unvaccinated people, the people who did not want to take the vaccine, are now struggling a lot with it. So, like, Florida is not the only guilty party.
We'll have a lot of the most anti-COVID, COVID isn't real. It's a tough way to get there, but are a lot of those people, or a number of those people coming around now based on, people they know getting sick and so on?
I want to say
yeah.
But there's still a very vocal, and I want to say minority, but I'm not sure. Like, it's got to be a minority. There's still a very loud minority who are trying to shout it down. And like, a lot of people that I see will be wearing masks. And of course, after everybody got vaccinated, they ditched the masks for a while, but now you see the masks coming back. So that's good. We had a funny thing here in Texas Texas, I don't know if you heard news, but they're having all sorts of ridiculous law changes the last couple of days come into effect on September the 1st. And then just like really silly things too, where we were all going back to school, and the governor did not want schools to be able to mandate masks. So he wanted, if the kids wanted to go to school and not wear a mask, they could do that. If the teachers wanted to teach without masks, they could do that. And the schools basically were saying, or and again, like, it's different. Many of the school districts, but not all, were saying, no, we have to wear masks. Delta's getting real bad. There's no ICU beds, blah, blah, blah. And so the city that I live in, San Antonio, they essentially sued the governor over this mandate. So the city sues the governor, and then they put a restraining order on the governor.
Is this kind of state versus federal and all.
Yeah, it's like county versus.
Yeah, because that's not quite right. But I get the general gist. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
So then the governor said, you can't do that. And he was like, I'm going to take you to court if you make everybody wear masks. And so there's just been this back and forwards where essentially, like, if, like, say Jacinda said, everybody in Auckland schools Auckland schools are not allowed to tell people to wear masks in school.
Yeah.
And then Auckland said, we're filing a restraining order, so you can't tell us to do that. And we're going to sue you because you're putting us in danger. Like, can you imagine Auckland suing the government? Like, it's kind of like that sort of weirdness. And then
totally. Yeah. So that is similar to, right. So, and then, so like, there's this whole thing of like perception, especially media reporting of stuff, within your own country, but also what we see here, like, and this division's becoming common globally, but we seem to see it particularly in the States. So what's the reality of this for you? Like, while this debate's going on that you just talked about, that if you and your neighbour see each other and disagree, does it actually realistically play out as a conflict?
It can be if you don't know that person well. Yeah. Like, I have friends here who are reasonably conservative, and I know that I'm not going to change their mind, and they know that they're not going to change my mind. So we just don't talk about that stuff. So, and we have plenty of other things to talk about. But where it does get interesting is if strangers get all up in your business and start shouting you down about things. That's where
that's heavy, man.
Get a bit weird.
Yeah. So, I'll tell you my observations here. I hope it interests you because it is your home. Plus, as I say, there's always the perspective from looking in and the images you see and what you read and so on.
I do miss it, and it's nice to hear a Kiwi accent again, so that's great.
You've got a kind of hybrid. So this, for chips. So this is an observation I made quite recently, because if you go online too much, particularly with social media, I'm not saying anything particularly revelatory here. Most people know this, like, you can be led to believe there's a reality that's different to actual reality. So I was getting quite stressed out by basically nutters posting anti-vax stuff and so on, locally, yeah? But when I go out, like when I went out yesterday to the supermarket, just the little snippets of observations I've had outside of my bubble, like, they must be such a fringe of people here, because everyone I saw was doing the right thing in the supermarket. Everyone had masks on. Everyone's being courteous, so I don't know what the point I'm making there is. I'm just sort of telling you what's happening back home, but also that I was relieved to realise that fringe of anti-vaxxers, at least in New Zealand, based on my anecdotal observations, I think we're going to be okay in terms of people doing the right thing.
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. And it's absolutely what's happening here. And again, that's the vocal minority. They're loud and they're morons. So it's like you're getting these loud people who don't actually know what they're talking about, or they're like doing their research in inverted commas. And it's just ridiculous. Like, I luckily have been able to talk to a few friends back in NZ, and they all seem to be on board with it. I talked to my cousin the other night, and he was in two minds. He was like, I don't know about that, but luckily his wife is extremely sensible, and she was talking him around to it. And I said to him too, like, look, man, like, you do all sorts of crazy stuff in your personal life, like jumping out of airplanes and everything. So why would you not just go and get this vaccine? Like, come on, like, this is such a little, like, even if the odds were like, I think the odds are like 80-20 or something at the moment over here, as far as like, if you're 80% of the ICU beds are unvaccinated people and 20% of the breakthrough cases and like vaccinated people. Like, I want those odds. I want 80-20. Like,
totally.
And
and
if it was 60-40, I'd want those odds.
These are topics we could do a whole podcast series on this, and people are doing them, but I can kind of sum it up with yes, frustrating. I'd probably say Dunning-Kruger effect is a good place to start. It's hard to see that playing out. It's hard to try and reason with people when they're unreasonable, and a voice to everyone. I was just thinking, watching One News the other day, when people say, oh, like, traditional media is dying and so on, and also it's really limiting. Like, there's something about the message being able to be controlled that's actually quite good sometimes. Like, it's not actually all, what do they say? Who controls the message and all of that is sinister. It's like, fuck, sometimes you just need one place that has good information for everyone, I guess what I'm saying there also is, like, it's great that everyone gets a voice, but it's actually not great when everyone gets a voice. Because a lot of those voices are just spouting absolute fucking nonsense. yeah.
And that's really apparent over here too.
Yeah.
We get people, and like, that's a big thing in America, like, I'll never forget one of the first real arguments I had with a guy over here was about something, I think it was something to do with music or something silly. And his reply really encapsulates what a lot of the people that you're talking about, like that, like how they think. And it's like, he said to me, he goes, just because you know more about something doesn't make you smarter than me. And I'm like, bro, that's the definition of being smarter than you. Like, if you look that up in the dictionary, if we're talking about music and I know more about music than you, then I'm smarter than you at music. That's how that works. And he got so annoyed, man.
Well, this is where it's so difficult, because then you get into like something that I don't say, for example, with me having a doctorate or whatever, like I don't want to flex that online as a way to say to someone like, you're wrong, because that becomes like a status thing. That's icky. You don't want to be that guy. But it's a really difficult situation the world's got itself into with all of this at the moment.
Because those people can be so wrong.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. And also, even with just like, but before, when you were talking about like what you can enforce and what you can't, like, I'd imagine I know there's a lot of people working within governments around the world of like, I guess it would be psychologists or whatever, in terms of like, well, how far can you push people before they go, I don't care whether I run out the house and die, I'm not doing this anymore. We're in a big pressure cooker. How's lockdown? Like, what, I don't actually know, bro. I've not Googled San Antonio or Texas, and what has all of this actually meant for you on a most practical day-to-day level? Have you guys been in a really huge long lockdown? Are you completely out of it at the moment? Like, what's the status where you are?
Yeah, so when COVID hit back in, what was it, like March last year or something?
Yeah.
We went on spring break here, and we were told to take our resources home with us because we may not be coming back to school after spring break, after that week off. And 1 week they didn't know what to do after that week. So it turned into 2 weeks, and it turned into like 3 weeks. And then they were like, okay, we better start up online school. And we were like locked in the house. Like, we couldn't get out. And that went for a few months. Or like, man, like not even like ridiculously though. Like, you could go to the grocery store and things like that. Like, we were locked down, and then it ended up like the numbers got better. Like, they kept looking at the numbers and stuff. And so when school started again in August of 2020, so the new school year. So we finished the school year under lockdown, started school up again, and we went back to school in person, but we didn't have all the kids coming back because some families wanted to keep their kids at home.
Right.
And some families couldn't keep their kids at home.
So are you setting up have you got a Zoom, like have you got a webcam on you, or are they homeschooling? Like, how did that?
So that ended up, we were doing hybrid schooling. So we would be teaching the kids in the classroom, and we would also have a Zoom lesson going for the kids at home to join in.
Yeah.
And then we would also be recording those lessons as videos for the kids who couldn't tune in at that time to do at a later date, and setting assignments online for them to complete as well.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. It doubled our workload basically for that entire
That sounds
year
familiar too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was zero fun.
And do you think, like, so in those first few weeks, because you sort of, I think you were kind of saying in a way it was a great unknown, which again was probably the way it was across the globe in a lot of ways. But then there's kind of like how it's handled. So were the kind of the things you want answered immediately, like, or you want sorted out? Like, did you know that you were going to keep, your pay was going to keep coming in from your work, for example? Like, was it handled quite well in that regard?
Yeah, there was no question about that. Like, that was never going to stop. That was always going to happen. So that security was there. My wife struggled a bit more. She had gone back to school to get her BA, and her school did not go back in person at all. So it was online, and she decided that she could not learn that way. And so she has put all her study on hold because it's still not really going back to a way that she feels she can go and do her best at. So that's been a little bit of it's been upsetting for her.
I'll give you my perspective as someone, teaching in a university institution. Like, I can say hand on heart that what we're providing our students isn't substandard in terms of the format we are delivering in, but the reality is that you very much touch on with your missus is I do worry, for our students getting a degree at this time, and it's kind of like kudos to them in a lot of ways for kind of sticking at it. But, I don't know, just for me, like it hit home again recently, obviously because we've gone into lockdown again after a year or so, whatever. But just that I happen to be teaching third years of a degree in their second semester at the moment. So in other words, I'm teaching people who in a few weeks should be throwing their silly head up in the air and going and getting too drunk and trying to, do all of that. It's like they're going to be stuck at home for their graduation, And it's a small thing, but it's a big thing in a way, and that's what's going to be their memory of all of this. Yeah. I feel like I hope I didn't cut you off there and you forget where you were at. So you're saying like it hit your wife harder because of the situation you're in? The state of Texas is weird. Like, I don't think they did it very much worse or better than anywhere else. Yeah. They're like, that's what's great about New Zealand is that when that first lockdown happened for you guys, the government tells you to do something and you'll just do it. Even us anarchists do it. Yeah. Let's just go home and the government's going to give us some money, or it's going to give our employers some money to pay us some of our paycheck, even though it's not going to be all of it. But we'll go do this. Okay, let's go do it. And so everybody did that. I remember talking to my mom and dad, and they're just like, well, yeah, like the government's given us, like we're able to give our employees like 80% of their wage or something like that. So it's fine, whatever the numbers were. I'm terrible at numbers. So it was okay, like people listened and you did it, and being able to close your border because you're a tiny Pacific island was a godsend, basically, like super, super good. Like here, you can't close the borders to states. Totally.
We had, like, so for example, like if one state had a mask mandate, you would just go to the neighboring state and they didn't have a mask mandate, and people were just going back and forwards between them, bringing like non-mask stuff back and forwards. So it's like there's no way to contain it. It just spreads like wildfire.
Well, I've thought of that in another realm of human movement, and I don't know the numbers on it, but I thought about like when I lived in London, say for example, the amount of Polish dudes painting with me who are getting paid cash, right? Like I'd imagine in the US and throughout Europe, like there's a whole lot of undocumented people moving around all the time as well. But back to like you saying, oh, that's why it's great for you guys in New Zealand. I think that's a timing thing as well, without getting into politics. Like I can think of some leaders in the past who would have like perhaps put our well-being, a lot more into jeopardy. It's like when people were talking about how well Jacinda handled this, I didn't really appreciate that at first till I realized that empathetic approach is actually a thing. Like I listened to a podcast recently where a really well-regarded virus doctor, I forget the word for that, epidemiologist, whatever, from Aussie, was saying that he reckoned that COVID wouldn't have been nearly as bad 10 years ago because there wasn't like the guy from Brazil, I forget his name, running Brazil. There wasn't Trump. There wasn't Boris. He basically said his like bad timing was stubborn kind of dictatorial men in power. Anyway, what about teaching over there, bro? Like, what do you notice? Like, is there things about students that are just universal, you know? What are the similarities and differences of teaching in an American high school compared to a New Zealand one?
Yeah, so there's a funny story there. So I did all my teaching in New Zealand, 13 years of it, at middle school and high school level. And
excuse me, is middle school's intermediate, right? 11, 12.
Intermediate and high school. Yep. And so I was head of music at a very prestigious Auckland private school, head of middle school music, and taught high school music there as well, and then worked with the government with curriculum development, assessment development, and implementation, and just was burning the candle at both ends, basically. Like, it was such a high pressure job, and we just, like, I was blessed that the guy that I worked with, the head of high school music, and like, we made a great team and just were crushing stuff. So it was awesome. But when I got to America, I took my teaching certification test to cross over. And I was never trained for primary school teaching. And I took my test. I drove into the local college on a Saturday morning at like early in the morning, take the test. And the computer crashed partway through the test. And I missed like, I think a third of about half of one of the sections, like maybe a quarter of the test, maybe a fifth of the test I missed because my computer crashed. And I wrote this really snotty email to the Texas Education Authority basically saying, this is abysmal. This would never happen in New Zealand where I come from. This is like I'm so disappointed that I went to take my test and this is what happened. Like, you guys can't even organize your way out of this and blah, 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 blah.
That's a bold move, bro.
And I was livid. Like, first of all, they got me up super early to go sit this test at like 8 a.m. on a Saturday. I'm like, dude, like, this is a Saturday. Why can't we sit? There's no other kids at school. Why can't we sit it at like 1? Like, come on. So, and then I get there and it doesn't work. And basically the reply that I got was, don't worry about it. You passed easily.
By filling out like a fifth of it.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll be sweet, bro. Go look after our kids.
And so I got my teaching certificate, and not only was I certified for high school and intermediate, which we call middle school, but I was now certified for primary school. So I decided, all right, I'm going to have a go at this. And I've been teaching primary school music for the last like 4 or 5 years, and 4 years, and it's been like a really refreshing change after coming from such a high pressure job in New Zealand doing the older kids to then just bust it right back to the little kiddos. I just realized like such a refreshment on my teaching career, you know, because I got to the end of that time in New Zealand teaching there and I was just like, I was burnt out, you know. I'm just like, no, I'm done. Like, working so many hours a week, and then you're driving in on like Saturdays to take rehearsals with like bands and stuff. And
I realize the nuance of everything you just described makes my comparison like pretty difficult, because it's like private school teenagers in New Zealand going to, you know, primary school kids in the States. So what's been the refreshing change to teaching like, I guess, kids rather than young adults and teenagers? Because I'd imagine that's got to be hugely different.
Oh, dude, it's so different. Yeah. So the first thing that really struck me was the kids from New Zealand, the ones that I taught that were the same age. So like start of intermediate, like your first form kids are the same as like our end of primary school.
11-year-olds basically at roundabout.
Yeah, 11-year-olds here are so much more mature.
Really?
Than 11-year-olds in New Zealand. Yeah. Yep. Like so much more mature.
And what do you put that down to?
Dude, I have no idea. I think, man, like, I don't know. I don't even know. Like, I just guess that, well, you know, and this might be because, like, working in private schools in Auckland, and, like, I did a little bit of time in, like, a public high school as well, I guess. And just going on my own school experience. But the kids here that I'm teaching now come from, by and large, like a really poor background, like really low, like we're dealing with the at-risk kids. So like 90% of the families are on welfare assistance, like, and some of them just come from the most horrific home lives.
They're battle hardened.
So, yeah. And so I think
that makes more sense.
I think those kids are probably there in Auckland, but they just didn't come to the schools that I was teaching.
I hear that, and I was thinking that because I was thinking, again, it's really hard. The questions I'm asking are kind of, there's too many parameters here. Now you say that, it does sound more like you're noticing a class difference rather than or a situational difference rather than when I was a kid, like growing up, like not like I grew up in the ghetto or anything, but I grew up in Lyell Bay and Wellington. It's no one particularly wealthy or anything. But the kids that always seemed like the cool kids, you know, like up till mid-teens or whatever, like the reality was, most of them were like, just like there was no direction at home or, you know, things were pretty tough or whatever. And like I realize now that me feeling like a little kid all the time was the luxury of actually just being able to be a little kid because my home life was good, right? I think that's what it is a lot of the time. So I hear that. And just teaching music here.
Yeah.
Well, not so, just
elementary music. So like in the primary schools here, we have a dedicated music class. So they come to me to learn music. And we didn't really have that in New Zealand. So so I couldn't do primary school music. I would have had to be a primary school teacher and teach all the subjects and throw some music in there. So it's kind of fun, man. Like we get to do all these like music games, and you're doing a lot of like building coordination and just interactions and just like the real basics of singing in time, singing in key, playing like drums and xylophones and then recorder, and like we get them on violin in their last year and stuff like that. So just and that feeds into like the band and orchestra system too in the States here. So your recorder kids, that's setting them up to go learn trumpet and saxophone and flute and everything. And then violins learn that. And then you get into orchestra and can do like double bass and cello and viola and yada, yada, yada.
And kind of cultural and racial mix? Is it quite a mixed school you're at, or quite a white school? Or?
No, it's very Hispanic. So, the schools that I'm at in San Antonio itself is extremely Mexican American and Mexican. So heavy Chicano population, and like also kids from not just Mexican, like they're from all sorts of different parts of Central America and South America and stuff as well. So definitely like the white kids and the African American kids are the minorities at the schools that I teach at.
Interesting. And is Latino culture in Texas its own thing? Like I say, because I think of like, again, my limited snapshots of American culture, you know, the very LA kind of, are you checking your tweets?
No.
Okay. The very kind of, you know, the very LA.
Nothing in my hand.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, man. Sorry, that sounds like accusatory. The very, you know, the kind of LA Latino culture is pretty well documented, right? Is it quite similar? I guess I'm talking about subculturally, you know. Is it a similar kind of a culture, or I don't know what I'm asking there.
Yeah, okay, so I can explain that absolutely for you. So
I suddenly started to feel like I was being a little bit like, not racist, but I was talking myself into a corner, but I don't know why, because I'm genuinely interested.
Well, yeah, because like we're from the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, bro.
So,
yeah.
You get a pass. I get a pass.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I basically want to say is there are lots of big white T-shirts and tricked out cars and like wicked, amazing graph artwork. You know.
Yeah. In America, traditionally, in certain pockets of like Chicano and Hispanic cultures. And Los Angeles was one of those, East Los Angeles in particular.
East LA, yeah.
And a lot of that, again, like not just Mexican Americans, like all sorts of Central Americans, South Americans that come to that area. And that was one of them, one of the big like lowrider culture and all that sort of stuff. And so there is a very strong thread there, but there's also a very strong thread here in Southwest Texas. And so it's a little bit different, but it's similar because it's the same sort of people, but usually much stronger ties to Mexico or to a different part of Mexico. Yeah. And so we get what's called Tejano culture here in Texas, which is basically Texas Chicanos. So Texan Chicanos, Tejanos sort of things. And that's, I don't know if you've seen pictures, but like, they're dressed like cowboys, basically.
Yeah, I have.
So
actually, I have now you mentioned it. Yeah. Hey, man.
So
look,
that happens, but we also have the other stuff as well, like the East LA styling sort of thing. So it's like a melting pot. And again, it's just subcultures within a culture, like, and there's a number of people who don't prescribe to either of those.
Oh, absolutely. That's why, to my credit, I did say subculture. Yeah. Look, I always connect to all of this with food, man. What food from that culture there do you fuck with, as they say?
Dude, so Mexican and Tex-Mex.
Yeah, Tex-Mex.
Food is great.
Good Tex-Mex. There's a lot of terrible Tex-Mex exported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just cheesy messes that make their way and get called Tex-Mex.
Yeah, there's a Taco Bell here, man. It's terrible.
Taco Bell is terrible here, too.
I know. There's one here, though. I don't even know how it got here. It's on its own. It's like it escaped on a boat or something. There's just one.
It's so strange.
Off Queen Street.
My wife actually messes with Taco Bell. I do not mess with Taco Bell. I call it Taco Hell.
Yeah.
There's another one, though, if you would believe it, that's even worse in California that hasn't come to Texas, but it's called Del Taco.
Yeah.
So if you're ever in California, do not go to Del Taco unless you want to spend like a day with like arcades or something. It's terrible. Yeah.
We'll go for a little bit longer because I want to talk to you a little bit more about record collecting and trading and stuff. But
right.
Just in summary, again, it's a big question, bro, but you've been through a lot. Not necessarily you personally, but, the country's been through a lot since you've been there.
Yeah.
I'd imagine it's been existentially quite challenging for you a number of times. Like, how are you feeling at the moment, man? Like, how are you and how are the States?
It was a huge thing for me. Like I alluded to before, like I'm usually... Like I like my routines. Like I have an aspect of OCD and like everything's got to have its place and I got to do things in certain orders and stuff like that. And that just makes my day go a lot nicer. So to uproot everything that I knew in my life in New Zealand and move halfway around the world was just a seismic shift. And so that has been a big upheaval and it's...
And then all of this happened. Yeah.
It did help that I could bring a lot of my important things with me. So like I shipped all my records over, all my guitars over, and had like a lot of that stuff. So I can kind of be like, all right, I've got my things that make me happy and I've got my people that make me happy. So yeah, I can be happy, but now I just need to find some of those routines again, and that's been tricky because we've moved around a few times. We went from like LA to Palm Springs, California, to Marathon, Texas, to San Antonio, Texas. So we moved a lot in a very short time, sometimes like multiple house moves within those cities. And now I feel like we've bought the house here in San Antonio and we can kind of just exhale a little bit to a certain extent. But yeah, the country, man, like it's different. I think it's a lot different than I thought it was going to be. Like going on tour is great, but actually stopping touring and living somewhere that's strange has been probably more difficult than I envisaged. And there's a lot of things that you miss culturally when you're on tour that kind of rear their head when you're not on tour. And when you're just living and faced with it day to day, like, America's confusing, man. Like, it's like some fucking confusing shit here where I'm just like, why do you all do this like this? Like, I don't understand. Like,
so that's like COVID or no COVID, Trump or no Trump, like just culturally. Yeah.
Like, they still have checkbooks. Like, I hadn't had a checkbook in New Zealand for like 20 years.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I noticed that when I was over there. Like, some things are like, a weird one like that. If we're going to talk currency, is I was like, why do you guys still have crazy prices with 1 cent coins and change? Like, it's just a complete waste of everyone's time.
It costs more to make a penny than it does to spend a penny.
Yeah.
So, like,
there you go, folks. Yeah,
it's tradition, and it's the American way of doing things.
You think that's what it is? Man. Kind of like a cultural stubbornness.
Yeah, there is a bit of that too. But like, I, by and large, like, my existential, like I said before, I'm really left leaning. Like, I'm on a hiding to nothing with that because I'm an artist, I'm an immigrant, and I'm an educator. Yeah. So I can't get very further left. I come from a democratic socialist country. So, like, there's like, I can't get much more left, really. And that at times is really difficult because there's so many things that go on that are very conservative here that I'm just like, I hate it. I hate that this thing happened. Like, the new abortion laws in Texas that came into effect yesterday. Like, I
saw that.
I hate that. Like, I'm like, why? This is not cool, And so it's like, I love America, and I've always loved America. I love, like, music from America is so huge for me. Like, everything in my life musically has been American music. And so to be here and to work with those artists and to track down and meet those artists and get to play with them and just, like, be where the records are is, like, such a huge thing. But like, America's broken. Like, there's so much broken stuff here that I don't even know how or if anybody's ever going to be able to start to fix it, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, there is, and I know another thing I noticed there is like the attitude to authority is very different to here, and it even buzzed me out, like hearing messages to the military and so on piped through the speakers at the airport. But I just want to, I'll drop that and go, I think we're doing a disservice here because you and I could sit here now and list off a whole lot of things that New Zealand could do better at, and, problems we've got here. Nowhere is perfect or ideal, and even perfect and ideal is a perspective-based thing anyway, isn't it? So everyone's got different ideas. Yeah. So before we close off with music, like, what's great about America, man? Like, what do you love about being there? What does it do that New Zealand doesn't do, Not that it's a pissing contest. Maybe leave the last one. Up to you.
Yeah. I like the fact that as a niche artist, I can do a lot better here than in New Zealand.
Absolutely.
Because the niche is so much larger here, because it's so much larger. And that was a big selling point. Man, like, culturally, I love the melting pot of cultures. I love the Mexican-American culture. I love that, like, a lot of kids that come into my class every day speak Spanish, and I get to share some Te Reo Māori with them. And it's kind of cool. Like, we talk about different stuff, and it's like, I get to, like, teach them how to sing some waiata, and then, like, they get to teach me how to sing, like, some Mexican folk songs in Spanish and stuff. And
that's cool, bro.
I have great friends here. A lot of my record collecting, DJing, and music friends from years ago are in Texas, and so, or have moved to Texas as well. And so I have a really good network of collectors and dudes that I can talk about records to and basically nerd out, about records. And that's really important to me, to get that, I guess, like, to get that currency in my heart, to sort of be able to, like, converse on a level that I'm not having to keep explaining stuff to people because they get it, like, people that get it, and that's...
Yeah. I had that. I was in Berlin with an old music buddy, like from my Wellington days, and I had a few beers with him, and I realized even though I love this kind of chapter of my life, you know, where I work and what I talk about with my workmates, like I hadn't sat with someone and just been able to talk about music almost in a coded language that not coded, you know exactly what I'm meaning. Like to just be able to like be on exactly the level and get all the references. Just occurred to me afterwards. I was like, wow, I haven't actually done that for a while. I used to do a lot of it. I used to do too much of it at the detriment of like kind of, you know, not getting other stuff done. I hear that. And look, on the collecting buzz, which we'll close off with, I've got some very much bullet pointed questions for you. Look, even availability, man. Like I even noticed, and I'm not really a collector these days. I used to buy stuff because I DJ'd basically, but you know, even when I moved to Australia, just realizing what was available on eBay there, just because of the sheer numbers of people compared to here, you know, and what comes in and out of the country, I'd imagine being there is just nuts, which we'll get to in terms of you being able to source stuff. So here's the list of questions, mate.
All right,
it's been a great combo.
So talking about this stuff, you know.
Man, we could go for days. Yeah. When did
so much other stuff we haven't even touched on.
I know. When did you? That's what I like about these is I prepare. You know, regular listeners will have heard. It's one of these things I've heard me say a lot is I try not to over research. But you don't want to go in cold. And look, I teach a podcasting course now, and my students never stop hearing that from me. Like, don't think that like you're Rogan and you're going to sit for 3 hours and talk. You need to prepare. Anyway, so I get together about a single page Word document of kind of bullet points. Yeah. So I never get through everything either. But anyway, when did you first get into record collecting?
Oh man. So this is what kind of made it weird, makes me a bit weird, I think, is that, so we always had records in my house, and like my mom and dad had records, and like not a huge collection, but there were always records around. My grandparents too had like 45s and 78s and LPs and all that good stuff. And ever since I was like a little kid, like when they would put a record on, I would just sit there and watch it and just be transfixed. And I was like 3, 4, 5, like tiny, just like be going, like watching it and just like dancing and just trying to feel it. And then they put the cassettes on, like watch the cassette spin around and just like be transfixed by it, you know? And then it ended up that I just got really into records, and like I got given a record player when I was like little. And like by the time I was like 10 or 11, like my grandparents would be taking me to flea markets, and we would just go to the flea markets and they would give me like, here's $5, and I would just go and buy records. And I like, a lot of times people would give them to me because they're like, oh, we've got this bag of 45s here that we're selling, but you're only like 11 years old, so here, just have them, because that's
around the time that records were like, you know, there was CDs were the thing. What do you want these records for?
Nobody wanted them. Everyone was getting rid of them. I was like this kid at the flea market, like 11 years old, just coming back with like bags of records. And of course, all my aunties and uncles gave me their records. Everyone was like, my mom would be like, oh, Kris really likes records. So all their friends would be like, oh, here's some records.
Oh, really? I didn't realize it went that far back.
I ended up with like all these. And also another great thing that when I was like, like 12, 13, my primary school every year would have like a school gala to like raise money.
Yeah.
And my mom used our basement to collect all the stuff for the White Elephant stall, which included the records. So the records would never make it to the school gala because I would just take them and like put them in my bedroom. And so I ended up with like, man, like when I was at high school,
there'd be a lot of chaff though, wouldn't there? You know, like there'd be like
but
a lot of like Salvation Army.
Like, I knew what I liked.
I'm winding you up.
Liked,
yeah.
I liked like rock and roll and like the Beatles and Elvis and like 60s stuff. And
you got like 800. You got 800 James Last records in there. You know?
No, I've never owned a James Last record in my life, but so we'd go through it. And of course, like at that age too, like 11 or 12, like I started getting into like punk rock and skateboarding. And then, so I had like this stuff going on where I'd be like listening to like these cassette tapes of like metal and punk and skateboarding, but then having all these like 50s and 60s LPs and 45s and 78s that I'd play on my record player too. So like totally different things. And then, like just going through high school, just started like buying more stuff and finding more things. And really when I got to like end of high school, late 90s, man, I just started buying records, like just old records, secondhand records. There was a couple of record spots back in Tauranga where I'd buy. And then when I moved to Hamilton, they had a number of used record stores there, and I would just go there and just buy like shit from there, you know. And
but then you also, I believe, I just read somewhere that like you got like, there's people who select, yeah, with great taste in music, but you got into like DJing as a musical instrument, pretty much, right? You got into kind of hip hop style DJing for a while, didn't you?
You know, I didn't. I
heard you call yourself a turntable wizard who'd stopped doing that.
No, I came from a totally different angle. So I came as a musician, as a guitarist, liking blues music and soul and like rock and roll and rock music, and then buying those records and it just ending up being like, oh, hang on, like this is like hip hop samples on some of these funky jams. And a lot of other people came the other way. So they would come to like hip hop and then go back through like disco to funk and stuff. So I was coming the other direction.
I'm guessing I'm more meaning like you said something about how you used to be more of a turntable wizard. I guess I'm kind of getting to like, did you buy a set of 1200s and a mixer or whatever and kind of like learn to go in and DJ? Or have you just learned to DJ playing gigs?
Yeah, I pretty much just learned to DJ playing gigs.
Great.
I did have mixer and turntables reasonably early on. But like it was never like a great kit. I think I got my first 1200s in like the early 2000s probably.
Well, as you've always heard people say, I'd rather hear someone select great music than really intricately mix nonsense.
Yeah, like I can mix. I'm not a scratch DJ.
Neither. My hands are too small.
That's basically been why I've had my career, is that my ears is good. And
absolutely.
So, that's what I built a lot of my reputation on, was finding good records and hearing those good records and stringing them together in a way that is good on a dance floor.
And so now you're a 45 guy, you're like a 7-inch guy format wise, like, so forgetting the past, because I just see how devoted you are to kind of digging and constantly on the hunt and trading and so on. Like, what do you collect now? Like, what are you going out and looking for?
So the main part of my collection is that R&B, funk, and soul 45s. And so that's like, if I find stuff on that I like and can use and I don't have, then I'll grab it. That's the majority of my 45 collection. Like I have like what I call rock boxes. So that's like garage, rockabilly, surf, psych, 60s, 70s rock stuff. Some of that stuff is in there. I have gospel 45s, I have jazz 45s. I have some punk rock and hardcore stuff from back in my youth still in 45, which is great, 7 inches there. And then my LP collection, like that's a little bit more broad. So there'll be more like blues and jazz and like a lot of soul and funk in there too. Like I really like original press soul LPs from the 60s. Like that's really nice to find.
So those original press soul LPs, but particularly the 45s and the genres you've mentioned, you know, I'd imagine that there's just no comparing what you found over the years in New Zealand to what you've found in the States, right?
Oh, absolutely not. So that's why I had to go to the States, because like I did okay in New Zealand finding stuff, and I probably did better than I should have in New Zealand finding that stuff just because I was so tenacious. But
there's even the practicalities of like, you know, I've thought about even like that Muldoon era where you couldn't even bring in a lot of stuff into New Zealand, you know, and those Haureki DJs, like there were air hostesses smuggling in records. So there's just the reality of like what's actually out there is very thin on the ground to begin with, you know. And generally, this is a huge generalization, I think that people who pay good money for imports are far less likely to part with them than that stuff just being out there in the mix, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you get a lot of New Zealand pressed records you find in New Zealand, obviously, and the American stuff's definitely thinner on the ground. And so I like the original pressings from the country of origin. And so like if it's an American Soul 45, I want to have the original American press of it. So and that is going to be hard to find in New Zealand.
Because there's that trading aspect to it that I've noticed you do as well. And I'm assuming you just do that as part of the culture. Or is it actually a genuine money spinner? And as a part of that, based on something you just mentioned, like, have you done quite well selling New Zealand pressings over there as a kind of rarity or an oddity?
Yes, so I can, like a lot of New Zealand presses that I brought with me when I moved over here, like I've now upgraded to American presses of American things and flipped off the New Zealand stuff and sold them to people who, for them, that is more of a prize than for me. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's a New Zealand press. I've had it for like 20 years, like, well, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So dealing records. So I deal a lot of records online and also set up at like record shows around this area of Texas. And so I have a lot of stock, like sale stock, 45s and LPs. And look, I'm not a great businessman. If I was a great businessman, I'd be in business. And like, if I was good with numbers, I wouldn't have got on this Zoom chat 2 hours too early.
But I wouldn't have. I told you twice the wrong time as well. Between us, we were like, it was a shit show. Anyway, yeah.
So I like to think that I make money doing it, and there's no doubt that I probably could make money doing it if I tried a bit harder. But a lot of it is just to turn it into a record that I want. So buy this, sell this, then buy something else that I can use. So is there
any form of, I don't know why I'm asking a serious record collector. I probably know the answer to this, but I'll go on anyway. Is there any form of completion on the horizon? Like, is there any, or it's just going to ever go forever and ever and ever?
Yeah, there's no end in sight.
Yeah,
like, I love digging for records.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And a friend of mine, he doesn't really collect anymore, but he spent many years collecting, and he doesn't have collections anymore. He just has sales stock. But he says, what else am I going to do? Like, I've got all this knowledge. Why would I not go out and use it to be able to like spin a profit on some records now?
And yeah, and like I can see like you're organizing stuff, and I'd like, I was about to use your own joke from the focus groups to relay it to you years later. You said something that's just funny. I'm glad I remembered it. Remember it was you, because I've used it again. Like, you said something along the lines of, like, you were talking about record shops, and you were going like, there's a fine line between it being a viable business and a mental illness. And I sort of see the same with record collecting as well. Like, some people I know are just basically hoarders, as in the TV show, you know. Even I remember seeing Jazzy J's collection and going, wow, even though you got a lot of great stuff there, you're kind of a hoarder, dude. Like, his floor fell in because of the weight of records he'd been given over the years, like you said. Anyway. Yeah,
I had that in Auckland in one of the houses that I was in. The floor started bananaing and the doors wouldn't close in the upper level of the house. Wow. So that was an issue.
Hey, look, anyway, I was going to say, like, this is, I think, a conversation that goes with ease and we go to an hour and a half, whereas with a lot of guests I go to an hour is a good sign. So let's just close off with, like, music nerds will love this. Like, have you got a couple of holy grail kind of digging stories? Have you just had a day where you turned up and gone, oh, my God?
Oh, dude, there's so many. So there's a lot.
Doesn't have to be the top. Just choose a couple that come to mind,
Yeah. So here's one that happened recently, like a couple of years ago. It's probably I'll tell you about my biggest find. So I went to a record show. There's actually the record show is coming up again in a couple of weeks. I'll be set up. But I went to this one. I wasn't set up to sell. I just went to buy. And I got there, and there was a Mexican-American guy at the table, and he had some records, and I went through and picked out a few good things. And I was like, look, what's up with your records? And he's like, oh, I've got a record store in this other town that is nearby San Antonio. And I bought a couple of things, and a friend of mine bought a couple of things at the table. And I said, look, like, what's up with your store? And he's like, I said, can I come out and check it out? Do you have more 45s? And he was like, I have more 45s, but they're in my garage because I took them out of the shop 20 years ago and nobody's seen them since. And he goes, I just grabbed one box and brought it out to the record show today. And he was letting them go super cheap. And so to me, that's like straight up alarm bells. So I said to him, this was on a Saturday. And I said, look, can I come out tomorrow to your house? And he's like, well, I don't want you to come to the house, but you can come to the shop and I will bring the 45s from the garage to the shop. So I talked to my buddy and I was like, look, dude, like, we got to go tomorrow? And he's like, yes, we have to go tomorrow. And so he's like, let's get there at this time. And so we both turned up. He lives in a different town that's like equal distance away. So we like converged on this other Texas town and got there. And the guy had already like unloaded a couple of trailers worth of 45s. And through the course of that morning, he had put probably about 10,000 45s out. And so we went through and we were going through them. And it was only us, and the guy was there, and there was one other guy that was helping him move the stuff. And my friend and I, we're very quick because we've been doing this for many, many years. And so we went through those records, and by and large, it was pretty abysmal. It wasn't the massive like fire that we thought we were going to get into. There was a lot of Tejano records, like traditional Texas Mexican music. The guy, his father-in-law had run a label doing that sort of music. And so there was a lot of dead stock of his label. But we both came out of there with probably 50 records between us out of 10,000, which is not great odds. But we paid like $1 a piece for the records. So it was like a super cheap day. And we got out to the car, and there was one record there that I had grabbed eight copies of, and it looked interesting. And as soon as I dropped the needle on it to listen to it, I knew that it was something really, really cool. And I heard it, and I was like, okay, this is great. And I said, this has got to come home with me. And we got out to the cars afterwards with what we'd bought, because we both bought like 25 records each. And we went through, and the stuff that we had doubles of, we split between us. So I gave my friend 4 copies of this record, and I took 4 copies of this record. I went home, and I was like, this sounds like a pretty good record. And I couldn't really find any info on it. And then maybe I didn't really do much with it. I played it for a few friends, and they're like, yeah, this is really good. And I was like, yeah, it's really cool. And put it on auction on eBay because my wife needed she needed a new car or something. No, not even that. I don't even know what. We had to pay rent or something for summer. That's right. Yeah, I didn't have a job over the summer, and I had to pay rent. That's what it was. The car one was one of the other copies. And
where's this going? Yeah.
And so I sent away a couple of what I thought was big ticket 45s. So one big ticket 45 that I knew was going to get a lot of money for. And then I put this one in the package as well, just as an afterthought, thinking, we'll see how this goes. Put it in there, sent it off to a friend of mine who does consignments on eBay. And he gets a lot of eyes looking at his auction. So like if you're putting stuff on eBay, you want to get the stuff that you're selling with a big consigner because more people will see that auction and bid it up more. So I sent them off to him. And it turned out to be the biggest selling 45 that they had ever sold through their consignment, and it sold for $6,500.
Fucking hell, US.
Yeah.
I'm
US.
so glad I kept quiet through all of that because I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Because the bit you're such a great storyteller, but I was like the only bit where I was like, oh, hang on, he's messed up a bit of this. So I was like, oh, what? You already knew the value, but you explained that you sent it as an afterthought with what you thought was going to be the. So what?
The other one that I sent off, I thought I might get like $5,000 for that. It ended up going for like $3,800. So those 2 45s, I got like $9,000 for after commission, and
that was $1.
That was. Yeah, they were both $1 each. So that's a pretty good return on your $2.
So
and,
just to I love that understatement. So just to close off, like again, the music nerd in me says what you haven't explained is like the provenance of the record. Or so what was sounds like you didn't even know a lot about it from online. Like what was it about this record?
It had been bootlegged once under a incorrectly spelled name on a French compilation LP from the early 2000s.
This is like we're writing a movie script of music. Yeah, right.
So it wasn't well known, but what it turned out was there was a copy in Europe, or a couple of copies in Europe, and 2 of the biggest DJs on the soul and funk scene in Europe were playing this 45 as a secret, without telling anybody what it was. And when it turned up on the auction, everybody who listened to it at the auction was like, oh, crap, that's this record. And so remember, I found 8 copies that day.
I totally do. Yeah, I'm right there with you, buddy. It sounds like you got a few more checks sitting there.
And so I gave one away because the next day, before I even knew any of this, I gave one to a friend of mine for free.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, my wife will never let me forget that.
Yeah.
Yep. But at the time I didn't know. I was like, I spent $1 on this record. Here, have a copy. I've got 4.
Yes.
So then I sold another one I sold another one basically we bought a car with another copy, for $4,000 or something.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then my friend who got the 4 copies, he sold all 4 of those for it was just insane. Like, I think we came up with between us with like $20,000 off those 8 records.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
And it's not even why you do it like you started with, but yeah, that's a great yarn and a nice place to end. Thanks, Kris.
Yeah.
We've been going.
I didn't even get to tell you about the record though, what it is.
Oh shit, yeah, what is it? What is it? Yeah, what is it?
So it's a local band from this town. They cut one record in 1973 and they recorded it at the recording studio, which is like a mile from where my house is.
Yeah.
And it did absolutely nothing. And they got upset with it. And basically all of the other copies were lost to time, thrown out or whatever, except for the 8 copies that we found. And then a couple of copies that a couple of English guys went and spoke to one of the guys from the band and got a couple of copies from the family. So there's literally a dozen copies known at the moment. And then, it's called Syndicate of Sound Incorporated. And that was a great day of digging. And the record itself is fantastic. One side is a funk side and the other side is like a crossover soul side. And it's, really, really good. I know that one of the guys is a pastor at a church in that hometown of his. So he's still in that town doing his thing. Another one, it was a family band. So the other brother, he had a Motown covers band in that town for a while. The dudes are still around, and I'm meaning to go out to his church and actually sit there and say, hey, can you sign? I kept one copy of the record, obviously, and so I'm like, hey, can you sign the sleeve of this record and that sort of stuff. But,
okay, I'm really glad that you pointed out we didn't have that vital end to that story, because what I love about that is, for all your knowledge and all your networks and all your digging, you just happen to be living in a little city or a little part of America where something sought after globally happened to be down the road from you in abundance.
Yeah.
Lost. Amazing. Hey, as I say, great chat, man, and take care. And if international travel ever exists anymore, I'd like to make it to San Antonio one day and have a beer with you.
Dude, we'll have tacos. It'll be great. I'll take you to a baseball game. It'll be fantastic.
Okay, bro. Take care, Kris. See you, man.
Good speaking to you, Lewis. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Since I met you, I just can't get you out of my mind. And lately, if I'm not with you, I feel like I'm wasting my time. Make believe you love me. Make believe you really care. Make believe you wanna form some kind of love affair.